So microscopic features. So we did gross anatomy of a bone. So what are the microscopic features of compact and spongy bone tissue? Well, you have these are things you see under the microscope. You have osteons. It's also called a Haversian system. Then you have a central canal. I'm reading this stuff through, and then I'll show you what these things are. So central or Haversian canal contains blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and nerves. Then you have perforating or Volkmann canals. Those go sideways, and those connect to the central canal and carry blood vessels, and nerves from the periosteum and into the compact bone. Periosteum, remember, is a dense, irregular connective tissue covering the bone surface. The osteons are composed of concentric rings, and so what you have in an osteon, it's like tree rings. So you have a central part and then rings going out in a structure. And so we talked about those a little earlier. We're going to look at those again here in a second. And each of those rings is called a lamella. So the multiple rings are called lamellae. Then you have little tiny areas, and these are little places where you have osteocytes. So in cartilage, you have chondrocytes that are in lacuna, and in bone, you have osteocytes that are also in lacuna. So osteocytes make their own little house also inside of bone. So you might start noticing that there's a similarity between cartilages and bone. They form this firm tissue, and they both have lots of extracellular matrix because they're both connective tissue, and they also have these cells that live in these little tiny houses called lacunae. So lacuna means little lake, and so there's a cell inside there, and there's a little house. It's a lake around it. You also have something called canaliculi. These are small channels that connect the lacuna. They allow nutrients to go back and forth from the blood vessels in the central canal to osteocytes and allow waste to be removed. Interstitial lamellae is bone that's between the osteons, and there's also circumferential lamellae, and that is outer layer. It's just deep to the periosteum, so it's just inside the periosteum. The inner layer is just superficial to a spongy bone, so it's circumferential. It's around the outside, very, very outside of the bone. I'll show you that in here in a second. So this is back to the original slide that we talked about, 8.2. So here's that little section out of the middle of the bone. That's what this is. And so you have the compact bone and the spongy bone on the inside, and showing the osteons. So there's an osteon right there. Here's an osteon. Here's an osteon. My circles aren't very good. Forgive me. Here's your periosteum, and showing the couple layers here. Okay, and you have blood vessels, artery, vein, and nerves. Oops, nerve there. Okay, and this is, oops, a little too close there. Oh, sorry. Get rid of that and that and that. Okay, so this is a central canal, and this is called a perforating canal. Okay, so you have, because they go sideways through the bone. All right, next slide. So this is a little more complicated slide. Let's figure 8.6. So it's the same original picture on this part. So you have compact bone, spongy bone, then you have your perforating canals. So they go crossways here and crossways here and crossways here. So it's transverse to the bone. Then you have central canals that go up and down. So central canals that go up and down like that, and they're carrying. So if I could draw arrows, it would be really nice. And up and down. There we go. So here's a central canal there. Here's one here. There's one there. There's one there. So all those little red and blue and little yellow nerve in there show you all the central canals in the middle of an osteon. So here's an osteon. And you notice they have these concentric rings. So there's a ring inside it, and a ring inside that. Okay, so each ring is called a lamella, Okay, so multiple are lamellae. So, and this this piece right here, what they did was they took different lamellae and they show you each layer. So these are concentric lamellae. Concentric means they're all around the central part. So they're and then we have nerves and arteries inside the central canal here. Then we have these little structures here. I'm going to draw right across here, right there, and there. So those are your lacuna. Okay, each one of them is lacunae. So here's a lacunae. Then they have their little house for an osteocyte. And then we have these little tiny guys here. These little tiny canals are called canaliculi, right? So here's your lacuna here and here and here, and it communicates with the central canal with these canaliculi that perforate and go all the way through to the central canal. So you have the central canal there, and you have the canaliculi going out to a lacuna there, which is a little house where the osteocyte is sitting. Okay, and on the outside is this section right here, and this, you see how it's straight down, but it doesn't have osteons in this outside part out here. Okay, so this is called circumferential lamellae. And then between the osteons, because you have these, so if you have round things, put a bunch of round things next to each other, right? I'll draw it on here. So put a bunch of round things next to each other. Okay, there's still space between them. So you fill that with what's called interstitial lamellae. So that's what this is describing up here. So interstitial lamellae is the stuff that's between those, and so you can have interstitial lamellae in here, like that, and over here, like this, so that you can have all these round guys all together, all these osteons. And each osteon is going to be like that. I'm not drawing a lot of rings, I'm just drawing a couple of rings in each of these just to give you the idea. Okay. So that's what an osteon is, all right? It's a bunch of concentric rings with the central canal right in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to draw another one, I guess, on here too. So there we go. So the concentric rings, they're a little more regular than the way I drew them there. So, and let's see. And this picture that's hidden behind my head is in your book, so you can look this up. So you have canaliculi, central canal. You have lacunae down here, lamellae there. So those are the main parts of an osteon. So know what an osteon is, and know that an osteon is not a cell. Cells are housed in the lacunae, which are part of an osteon. And the lacunae tend to be clustered along the edges of like lamellae. So here's a lacuna here, here's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one here. Okay, and a lamella would be like this kind of ring going along through here, and so that would be I can draw it really. It's hard to draw on this little pad. Sorry. So this right here makes the lamella. Okay. So that shows the width of it. So then there's another one on the inside. You can see these rings. You can see a ring there, and the edge of a ring there, and the edge of a ring there. Okay. All right. And then then you see all these lines, these little tiny lines like that. Those are all the canaliculi. All right, going out to those osteocytes, because those osteocytes are all alive and they're making extracellular matrix if they need to, and they're just sitting there waiting to do their job. If you break a bone, they'll start making more stuff. All right, next slide. So here's a little bit better picture in some ways of what spongy bone looks like. So these are the trabeculae here. So you can see they're kind of beams that stick out and they cross back and forth. And on the outside of these beams is endosteum. Okay, so endosteum coats all over the outside of these. Okay, I'm just drawing this in a line, but think of it as going all the way around all of these. Okay, so endosteum coats all that stuff. And let's see. So here's an osteon here. So you can see here's the ring, whole ring structure, and there's a central canal which has the blood vessel, has the blood vessels in it, and you can see each of the rings. I'm going to draw this around like that. Okay, around, and there's another ring here, and here's another ring here. All right, so that gives you shows your lamellae, and then here's a expanded view here of a lacuna. So you have an osteocyte is this black part in the middle, and then you have well, that's the nucleus, and then you have the osteocyte is in this little region that it made, this little house it made for itself, and then all these parts that are sticking out to the side, those are all canaliculi, where the osteocytes can communicate with the blood vessels that are in the central canal of the osteon. So here's a perforating canal here. Here's a central canal here. So that's a central canal. This is a perforating canal. And you can see, like, here's a lacuna with an osteocyte here. Here's a lacuna with an osteocyte. And then you see all the little canaliculi there. So you can see easily the lamellae, canaliculi, osteocytes inside the lacuna and the central canal. And so that's what compact bone looks like here. Oops. Try it again. This is what compact bone looks like, and this is what spongy bone looks like. Okay, next slide. When you look at it under the microscope, it's not quite as regular as we draw it in the as it's drawn in the diagrams. So you can see here is an osteon here. Oops. Yeah, here's an osteon, and you notice that, like, this is really an osteon here. I'm going to draw that, and here's an osteon here, and it's a little bit irregular. And here's an osteon that's a little bit more regular here. Okay, but you notice it has, like, some other rows out here that kind of extends out. So this is really interstitial lamellae out here, and this is really the osteon here. Okay, so here's a really in the enlarged one here. This is a 400x magnification of an osteon. So in the middle, this is central canal, and then number one, these are canaliculi. Number two, that's a lacuna. And let's see. And number three, it's hard to see, but there's actually it's supposed to be a line across there. And that's a little far, sorry. And that's number three, is this right here. So that'd be a lamella going, like up and around through here. Okay. If you can see that, so there, you can see that kind of line going across there. So it's just the concentric rings, lamella. All right, so next slide. Here's a little bit better picture of it. This is, I think, from the old book. So here's your lamella. You can see that easily. Here's a lacuna, the central canal, and then the canaliculi, which are coming off the osteocytes there. Or coming off the lacuna there, going towards the central canal. And they also connect. You can also connect osteocytes with each other, so they can communicate back and forth too. Next slide. Okay, so that's microscopic features of compact and spongy bone. This is just a summary of at least the spongy bone, and then we'll talk about bone hardness. So spongy, cancellous, or spongy or trabecular bone, sometimes also called cancellous bone, has these trabeculae, referred to as little beams or flat plates, lattice-like network of thin bony columns. They're all lined on the outside with endosteum, dense irregular connective tissue. Lamellae are concentric but flattened rings in the spongy cancellous bone or trabecular bone. Lacunae, the dark areas that are found between the lamellae, have osteocytes in them. Osteocytes produce bone tissue, canaliculi, small canals, connect the lacunae, and they go from the blood vessels to various osteocytes and allow waste to be removed. And then you have red marrow, fills spaces between the trabeculae. And also bone hardness. Bone hardness results from the extracellular matrix, the ECM. Extracellular matrix is like about rough numbers, 25% collagen, 25% water, and 50% mineral salts, like calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate. These salts in combination, calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate together, they form a compound called hydroxyapatite. You don't have to know this, but you will probably hear this at some point later on in your careers. And this is the actual structure of it. You don't have to know the structure of hydroxyapatite, but it has calcium, 5 calciums, 3 phosphates, and an OH group on it. So you have hydroxyapatite you have is mostly calcium phosphate. So you have mineral salts, calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, and you have water in your bones. So if you lose water, your bones. Actually, we'll talk about this in a second. There's a lab activity we do where if you lose water, your bones get brittle. And then we have collagen in your bones, and collagen provides a little bit of flexibility, and your content decreases with age, and your bones get a little more brittle as you get older. So two things happen. One, you lose collagen content, so you lose the ability to hold water as well, and you also have a lesser activity from what are called osteoblasts. Osteoblasts make bone, and you have a higher activity of osteoclasts, which break down bone. So you start having holes made in your bone from the osteoclasts. Osteoclasts are there to remove calcium from bone in case you need it in your body, and osteoblasts take calcium and put it back in the bones and reform bone. So you can form more bone with osteoblasts, and then you break it down with osteoclasts. So osteoblasts make bone, osteoclasts break down bone. Also referred to, osteoclasts are called bone eaters. And so you can release calcium from your bones with osteoclasts, and you put calcium back in your bones with osteoblasts. Bone tissue, it's really like 65% inorganic calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, and it also has 35%. It's called osteoid. It's an organic compound. I'm not sure if you can see that word. So it's osteoid. Osteoid is it's an organic compound. It has osteoblasts, osteoclasts, osteocytes, along with ground substance. Hyaluronic acid is a proteoglycan, collagen fibers, and water. Hyaluronic acid is really good at holding water. So you have this softer material inside the hard material, or associated with the hard material. So and that's what forms bones. So bones are actually a little bit, in a sense, flexible. So they can take vibration. They can take a hit if you're playing football or whatever sport, or you're kicking soccer ball. Your bones just don't immediately break. They can take the shock from hitting things. So, or if you stub your toe, your toe doesn't always just shatter. So because of water and collagen and hyaluronic acid in and around the bones. So, all right, next slide. So here's the end of a femur, just showing it's a section through the femur. So this would be essentially a frontal section. Here's your proximal end. It's the epiphysis. And so on the outside, you have a very thin layer of compact bone. You can see here the compact bone on the outside, and this is all spongy bone on the inside. Okay, and here's number 2 is showing spongy bone on the inside. And you can see how it's beams going across and they're crossing across each other. So this gives you a structure on the inside that gives you support on the ends of the bone. And then you have on the outside, as you get down the diaphysis region. So here's the metaphysis. So you have the epiphysis, and then down here is this is the diaphysis region. Okay, and so between those two is a metaphysis, and then you see that the diaphysis region has a lot thicker compact bone region there. Then this section here, it's behind my head over here. So this section here is the medullary cavity. Okay, so this is just showing you what it actually looks like rather than a diagram. And so this is actually on the inside of the bone. It would actually look like that. So you would see actually this hollow center where it would be filled with fatty tissue, yellow marrow in an adult. All right, next slide. Okay, this is what spongy bone looks like here. So this is spongy bone. Just showing you what the trabeculae or trabecular. So here's what the trabeculae look like. And here's the trabeculae. They're covered with endosteum, so there's endosteum all over the top of these. Okay, it's all around them. And it's all around all these all around all of it, right? So you have connective tissue covering all of the spongy bone. Okay, and it makes a whole layer around it. I drew it as like these little squiggles, but just think of it as going all the way around. It wraps all the way around the trabeculae. Okay, and you notice that it's not as regular as an osteon is. Okay, so but this is what, if you did a section through spongy bone, that's what it looks like. So it's kind of an osteon, but sort of flattened, because you can still see these layers. Here's this is both sides of the lamellae here, and you still have canaliculi going through here, right? And you still have lacuna with an osteocyte in there. But the lamellae seem to go almost like a spiral in, right? And there's not a central canal there. So what you have is so here's your osteocyte and a lacuna. Here's your lamellae. Here's a canaliculi there, and there, and there. There, and so here's osteocyte and lacuna, and on the outside here, these are osteoblasts, and then you have this big fatty guy here, this fatter guy. This is an osteoclast, green guy there. So, and you notice he's got these little tiny dots in the middle of him. So you see that there, and there. Osteoclast is multinucleate, has multiple nuclei in it, so it's a larger cell. And the osteoblasts all have they're more normal. They have a single nucleus in each one of those. So, okay, that's it for that. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's what it actually looks like in a photomicrograph. You have here's red marrow is this part here. Okay, and here's red marrow here, and here's red marrow here. I'm just circling all this so you know where the margins of this are. So remember, if you take a section through something, it's like this, but you take a section right through the middle of it, you're going to have different spaces in between will be the red marrow, and then the trabeculae are sticking across each other like this. So you're going to get different views. You get some are like longitudinal, and some are like pointy, like you're cutting. You'll see ovals, you'll see long sections, that kind of thing. So here, these are sections through trabeculae. So you can see trabecula going through here. So this is all. So this dark red part is all trabeculae here. Okay. So that's so that's the trabeculae there and here. Right. Okay. Next slide. This is showing actually a photomicrograph of actually osteoclast, and you can see all the nuclei that are in it. So there's your osteoclast pointing to it. Here's an osteocyte that's inside a little lacuna there. Here's an osteoblast, which is on the outside, and so that's foreign bone, and the osteoclast is breaking it down. And you see here's the diagram of an osteoclast here. Here's an osteocyte, and you see it has these little fingers sticking out going into the canaliculi. And then you have an osteoblast, which has a single nucleus in it. And then you can see the endosteum. You see that little thin layer right there that's pointing to it. It's a thin layer of dense irregular connective tissue on the outside of the spongy bone. So that's the spongy bone is there, and this would all be marrow here. So there you go. Okay, next slide. All right, so when you're developing red marrow versus yellow marrow, so red marrow, when you're little, you're making you're making red blood cells like all over the place. So you are infant, like you're less than a year old, you are lit up like a Christmas tree. You are red, red, red. All your bones are making red marrow. When you're above 25 years, you notice that you've lost a lot of places that you're making marrow, making red blood cells. All places you're making it now, you're not making it in any of the long bones in the leg, except for near the head of the femur. You see it in the hip bones. You got still making it in the ribs and the vertebral column, shoulder blades, scapula, and skull. So, but you aren't making it in the arms and legs anymore. Whereas in a kid, you're making it all over the place. And you replaced all that red marrow capability with yellow marrow, because you don't really need to make that many red blood cells when you're older. You know, you've made enough. You've got them. They have a life in your body about maybe 3 months, and so then they're gone. So you got to make more to replace those, but you're not having to like make some as you're getting bigger. So when you're little, you're growing in size, and you're having to make more cells just to fill the volume of blood that keeps increasing. So then here's the diagram again. So we have epiphysis, diaphysis, and another epiphysis, and this is the metaphysis here and here. And so here's showing spongy bone with there's some red marrow here, but there's not really any red marrow up here. And we have yellow marrows all filled in here, and this is all there's compact bone on the outside there. So that's a left femur with a frontal section to it, or coronal section. All right, next slide. So here it shows the conversion of red marrow to yellow marrow with aging. I just think this is interesting. You're not going to get tested on this, but I just thought you ought to know. So here's your newborn and child, and you're just starting to get a little tiny bit of yellow marrow right there in the heel. And then as you're adolescent, you're starting to lose, you start making a little more yellow marrow and a little bit less red marrow. And as you're an adult, there's less red marrow all over. And then when you're really old and you're starting to get hunched over because of osteoporosis, you've got very little red blood cell production. Some still in the vertebral column, probably in the skull too, but you've most places in your body are not really making that much red blood cells anymore. So this has implications for not only red blood cell production, but also production of other types of cells as well. So that are involved in the hematopoiesis, in the blood cell formation of various types of blood cells in the body. So, all right, next slide. So you're just not making as many of those types of cells as you get older as you were when you were younger. So just lots of things happen as you get older. So you don't repair things as well. You don't have you don't make as many red blood cells, all that kind of stuff. All right, next slide. Okay, let's talk. Since we're here, I like to always do like since we're here kind of things. So we are here talking about bone. So let's talk about bone disorders. So osteoporosis. This is what osteoporosis looks like if you do it. This is a scanning electron microscope, scanning electron micrograph, and so this shows the holes that are being formed in bones. These are osteoclasts, are breaking down the bone, and the osteoblast action is not robust enough to fill in those holes that the osteoclasts are making. The osteoclasts are just going wild, and the osteoblasts are not able to keep up. It helps if you have calcium, and vitamin D is very important for your absorption of calcium from your small intestine. So make sure you take vitamin D. You want to take vitamin D3 as well. It's the active form, so it gets activated by sunlight, and the vitamin D helps you absorb calcium in the small intestine. And osteoblasts will need that to put calcium into your bones. If you don't have calcium, then the only thing that's going on is osteoclasts are taking calcium out of your bones. Also, what happens is, in women especially, it happens in men too, but in women, estrogen tends to or has an effect to inhibit osteoclast activity. So as you're going along through life, women, do pretty good. They don't lose too much bone mass until you hit menopause, and then estrogen levels drop off like a cliff, and so there's no inhibitory activity or no inhibitory activity of estrogen on the osteoclast, so they just go wild. They start chewing away at the bone. So sometimes you get supplementation with estrogen to try to inhibit some of that osteoporosis that's going on. And on the right side, here's what normal bone should look like. So, and this is, as you'll notice, these are like bones going across each other. So this is spongy bone we're looking at. This is the interior. So this isn't necessarily the cortical bone on the outside. This spongy bone starts getting eaten up by all the osteoclasts on the inside. Okay, next slide. So, and one other bone disorder to think about. If you have vitamin D deficiency, this doesn't happen in the United States anymore. It used to happen, but because people didn't know to take vitamin D, and we didn't get enough from our diet, depending on what your diet was. So you get vitamin D from like seafood. So if you're inland, you didn't get as much vitamin D from. You get vitamin D from plants also, but it depends on your diet. You might not get enough vitamin D. So what happens is you're without vitamin D, you don't absorb calcium from your small intestine. Then you don't have calcium put in your bones. So your bones, remember, they have some collagen and they have hydroxyapatite, which is made of calcium phosphate. But you don't have, you aren't able to get as much of that. So you have a little more collagen in percentage-wise to the hard extracellular matrix, the hydroxyapatite. So your bones are more flexible. So what happens is, if you don't have enough vitamin D, your bones get more flexible, and so the legs tend to bow out like this. And so that's what you can see. Here's the femur up here. The femur, you can see that's bowed out on both sides. So because of flexibility due to instead of being straight, they're bowed out. And in the slide on the right, you can see that the lower leg bone, especially on this patient's left side over here, is really, really bowed very badly. And you could potentially fix this with braces and supplementation with vitamin D and make sure they get enough calcium in their diet and that kind of thing. Over a period of time, you could potentially straighten this back out again. But lots of times in olden times, you'd see this more often. But in countries that have not very good nutrition, you'll still see this kind of thing. You won't see it hardly at all in the United States anymore. So just we have really good diet. Really good nutrition in the United States. So, okay, and the other thing we'll do, I've also got some bone demonstration videos, so you can look at those, looking at what happens when you have bones. It's a demonstration we would do in lab. If you soak, it's kind of fun to do. If you, I guess I should describe this. If you soak a bone in acid, then in acetic acid, and acetic acid is CH3 COOH, which actually looks like CHHH, and then C double bond O and OH. Okay, so it's an acid because this hydrogen right here tends to get lost. So this goes back and forth between that structure there and this structure, and it tends to go more towards this structure. So you have an O minus plus a positive hydrogen ion, which is so that makes it acidic. It loses that hydrogen ion. Well, if you know chemistry at all, then you know that calcium is positively charged, so it heads over to this negative charge over here. So acetic acid will complex with, it'll draw calcium it'll complex with calcium. It's called chelating calcium. So it chelates. Chelate. It chelates calcium. So that's CHELATE. And so it draws calcium out of bones, and so if you lose calcium out of bones, then your bones get a little more flexible. So this is a kind of a fun thing that you can do around Thanksgiving. If you take the wishbone out of the turkey and soak it in vinegar, vinegar is acetic acid, 6% acetic acid. You can soak it in vinegar for a couple of days, and the calcium comes out of the bone, and then the wishbone gets all flexible. Then you wash it off with water, and then you challenge your younger sibling to pull the wishbone, and the wishbone then just bends. So it gets real flexible and bends, and it has a real hard time breaking it. And so, or you can challenge them to break the wishbone, and then they'll be like confused because it doesn't break really easily. And if you dry out a bone, the bone gets really brittle. So why does that happen? Well, if a bone gets brittle because it has water in it, it has maybe 25% water. So if you take the water out, the collagen that's in there doesn't have water out, so the collagen gets brittle and the bone gets brittle. So you can break a bone, a dry bone, much more easily than you can a fresh or wet bone. So water is very important for your cartilage as well as for your bones. So make sure you drink plenty of water throughout your life too. Let's see. So I'll put some demonstration videos of what bones soaked in vinegar will do, and bones that have been dried, what happens with them. So, and I think that's it. So, all right, we will see you for the axial skeleton next time. All right, have a great week. Bye.